The New York Rangers are about to play hockey. This Friday and Saturday, the Ranger prospects are going to be taking on the Flyer prospects in a two-game set, and we're breaking it all down with Rachel and Russ from Locked On Philadelphia Flyers in a special crossover episode.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 898 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And so, yeah, wanted to go ahead. We actually already recorded the crossover portion of today's episode, which is basically the entire episode. Had a lot of fun talking with Rachel and Ross from Locked On Flyers. We're looking at the two-game set coming up on Friday and Saturday. The Ranger rookies going to be playing the Flyer rookies in a pair of games on those days. Also talking about Peter Laviolette, John Tortorella, the offseason wheelings and dealings of each team. Just a fun Metro Division crossover. And yeah, enjoy.
It's time for another Metro Division preview crossover episode. Today, we've got the New York Rangers and from Locked On New York Rangers, John Chick. Welcome, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rachel. I believe we did one of these in the past. It might have been an in-season crossover, if I'm remembering correctly, but this is always a lot of fun. And Russ, nice to talk to you here today as well. And looking forward, we got, in one form or another, we got Ranger Flyer hockey on Friday and Saturday. So definitely looking forward to that as well.
Absolutely. We thought this week would be the best week to do this crossover since our kids are playing each other this weekend. Just to start off, John, looking at the Rangers at the end of this past season, like what was the general sentiment around the team and kind of what was the goals that were set for this offseason?
Yeah, it was basically the polar opposite of the season before, because 2 years ago, obviously a lot of people, most people I would say, didn't even have the Rangers making the playoffs. And even the people that did thought like, well, maybe they'll squeak in, but they'll probably get knocked out in the first round. And, they have that really dramatic series win against Pittsburgh, coming back from 3-1 down, going all the way to the Eastern Conference final. Just 2 wins away from the Stanley Cup final. And everybody's all excited going into this past season. And, of course, the Rangers make a lot of moves at the deadline, not the least of which was Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko. Really felt like they were a team that could do a lot of damage, make a deep run, and potentially even win the whole thing. And the playoffs couldn't have started any better. You go into New Jersey and you crush them twice, 5-1 in both of those games. And after that, long story short, it basically just fell apart. And people were not happy. A lot of star players on the Rangers just did not play well, did not get the job done. A lot of, the Ranger fan, anger has kind of been aimed at Artemi Panarin because he had a really rough series. Patrick Kane really divided the fan base right from the second that he got here. But overall, they just didn't get the job done. I think the Devils were a little bit hungrier in that series. But I also think in a lot of ways, your season ends in disappointing fashion like that. It just makes you look forward to the next one that much more. And, I think I can speak for all three of us when I say that I cannot wait for this rookie series and then ultimately the start of the NHL season as well.
Yeah, I agree, John. I was at that Game 7. I covered that one in New Jersey. And so that was an interesting dynamic. And everything you said was right. As far as this rookie series, what's nice about it is even though there's two organizations going in different directions, the Flyers could sort of look at this and know that the Rangers were in their shoes like 2-3 years ago when they, had made the massive rebuild and sent out the letter and all that. I look at it and, the first guy I'm going to talk about is Brennan Othmann, because I know there's so many Ranger fans that want him to play this year. And I just saw him up close at the rookie photo shoot, and he's not physically there yet. Like, I just want to caution people, if you want him to play his game the way he is going to play his game for his entire career, then you want him to play in the AHL this year and build himself up and not have to worry about the NHL at the age of 20. I just don't think that's the right move. I don't think they're going to make that move, but I know a lot of fans are interested in that. What's your take on that?
I have a fairly similar take. I mean, in the OHL, it's not just the points and the scoring and everything. He is a very physical player, and somebody that's kind of a wrecking ball out there. But man, you go from the OHL straight to the NHL. I mean, that's a hop, skip, and a leap forward, and it is a whole different monster. And to your point, Russ, I think he's best served probably starting this season with the Wolfpack in the AHL. Get some seasoning there. You don't have to force it. You have a really good roster. You have a roster that should be playoffs this season, and Othmann can come along at his own pace. If he goes to the AHL, completely lights it up, looks like he's ready, then maybe that's a conversation we start to have, midway through the season or whatever it might be. But yeah, I'm all for him getting a little bit more seasoning in the AHL and just building his confidence, building himself up. And to your point, again, just 20 years old. I mean, we've seen players do it. We've seen teenagers in the NHL, but again, there's just no real reason to force it right now. And I'm looking forward to watching him, continue his development, hopefully in the AHL. And then, like I said, if he lights it up, then we can have that conversation a little bit later in the season.
Yeah, something that's interesting that connects him to the Flyers is that his Peterborough teammate, J.R. Avon, is one of the more interesting Flyers rookie prospects that we're going to see this weekend. He was an undrafted free agent signing to the Flyers after he had gotten a camp invite. And so these two guys will potentially get a chance to play against each other after just having this great run in the OHL and the Memorial Cup this past year.
Yeah, it's interesting how that can happen. I had a similar question for the two of you because, a couple of years ago in the World Juniors, we saw Team USA, win the whole thing. And I think it was the third line or maybe the second line, but I think it was the third line for Team USA. A couple of prospects, one for the Rangers, one for the Flyers. You had Brett Berard from the Rangers, former 5th-round pick, and Bobby Brink for the Flyers. I want to say a former 2nd-round pick and actually made his debut with the Flyers this past season. And they really clicked during the World Juniors. But the thought that I had watching it is, it's all good now, but these two are going to be at each other's throats in a few years if they're on the Rangers and Flyers. But your thoughts on Brink? Obviously, a high draft pick and got a little taste of NHL action last season. Just your thoughts on his development and what kind of role he could play for the team this year.
Yeah, I think he's a real interesting case right now because we are very enthusiastic about Bobby Brink and his potential, but he, I think, is somebody that has need a little bit more cooking. He had an injury that he was coming back from this past season. And so we really only got like a half season of AHL time from him. And I think that he's just one of those guys that's going to have to start out in the AHL again. But will have high potential for that call up as long as he can keep the momentum going that he built up toward the end of last season.
Yeah, what I'd add to is like the way Brink and Berard play are complete opposites, and that's why they're good line mates because, Brink is a guy that needs the puck and, he can dish it, but he's a guy that generally needs the puck and he needs to, get high quality scoring chances. Now, sometimes he does them in really tough ways, like he just doesn't care about his body, and he's gone through a lot of injuries. Berard's like that too, so that's why they're kind of like that way. I think this year is the biggest year for Brink because I don't want to say it's on the brink for him, but I think with the Flyers it could be. I think he really needs to show that if he's not an NHLer, he is that next guy up, like Rachel said, and he needs to stay healthy and he needs to put points up. These things weren't necessarily around last year, and so you saw flashes. He's got to do it more full time now because I think otherwise he might fall victim to just falling further down the depth chart. Right now he's pretty high, but and the other thing is to the people that put out the prospect rankings, since Rachel did talk about J.R. Avon, he's in my top 10. I don't care if he's not in your top 10, but I think people need to watch a little more J.R. Avon just in general.
Mm-hmm. We are big fans of his on this show. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny how with the prospects, everybody's kind of got, their sleeper guy or somebody that they just really like. And actually, while we're talking about Berard, he's kind of become that for me. It just feels like for somebody that the Rangers took in the 5th round, like I always end up circling back to him one way or another. He's having a big season at Providence or he's killing it in the World Juniors, or there was actually a charity hockey game in Stamford, Connecticut a little bit earlier this summer Really, really nice thing, the shoulder check showcase. And he participated in that along with a bunch of players from the Rangers, Kreider, Fox, Mika. They were all there. Barclay Goodrow was there. Even Trevor Zegras was there. So that was a cool thing. But yeah, he pops up every so often, and not the biggest guy out there, but, a feisty player. I don't know that he'll ever be a superstar in the NHL, but it is fun to sometimes root for, these underdog players and, just some of your personal favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Gabe Perreault is not going to be at camp because he's off to college, but in terms of his development path, what is that looking like? And when do you anticipate seeing him with the Rangers organization?
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure. I want to say, I'm pretty sure he was asked about this, and he talked about maybe 2 college years, if I'm remembering this correctly. It's possible I have it mixed up with a different process.
No, I think that's what he said at the draft.
I think that's what he said, right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. Look, if he goes to college and he dominates and he feels he's ready and he wants to move everything along, then that's awesome. I'm happy that the Rangers finally decide to take a right winger in the first round. I know in hockey and even in other sports too, they'll say sometimes oh, just take the best player. Don't worry about positional need, especially in a sport like hockey where we don't see these guys for a couple of years. But the Rangers, to me, right wing is where they've been the thinnest for quite a few seasons now. And, a lot of people had Perreault going maybe top 10 in this year's draft. He was a little bit polarizing, but man, when he kept sliding and he's still there for the Rangers at 23, I'm thinking man, I think they got to pounce here. I know that some of the concern might be that he's not the biggest guy out there, but the talent is off the charts. And you look at different beat writers doing their top 10 Ranger prospects and lists like that. He's already at or near the top of all these lists. And I'm very excited that they were able to get their hands on them. And luck was just kind of on their side the night of the draft that he fell as far as he did.
Yeah, what I could add about Perreault, because I'd seen him a lot live last year, was he's got all these offensive gifts that you want: hands, IQ, passing, shooting. His skating's not great, but he does need to put on a lot of leg muscle. And so if you look at his legs, they're really thin. If he could build that up, that might help his stride and that might give him more explosion. So that's why he knows he needs at least another year in college and then another summer to really kind of see where he's at that way. To me, it's all about him building himself up physically. The other stuff's there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. It's a shame he's not going to be able to participate at this prospect camp, but there will be more down the line at some point. And, while we're talking about all these highly touted prospects, there's another guy for the Flyers. Got to ask you guys about. He actually scored an overtime winner during one of these 2 games last season. For anybody that needs a refresher, Flyers won both of these last year. They won 2-1 in overtime and then also 5-1. But the first one, Tyson Foerster scores in the overtime period. Another young player who got a taste of action with the Flyers this past year. I want to say it was 7 points in 8 games, somewhere in that ballpark. So small sample size, but obviously passed with flying colors last year. And do you expect him to be there at the start of this NHL season with the Flyers? And what are your expectations from him?
Oh, yeah. I think, if you look at all the Flyers prospects, he is the one, and we did a listener poll about it as well, got the highest percentage of most likely to make the team this upcoming season. I think of all of them, he's the most ready to do so and make that jump. He really showed at the end of this past season that he could fit in. I think he's working well with John Tortorella for the most part. And so I think that's also a benefit right now. And he just kind of brings a quality where he's does what he's told, serves the role that he's asked to play. And in a Tortorella system, that's what you got to do.
Yeah, what I could add is I did speak to Tyson at the rookie showcase. We did put up some of that video on the Locked On Flyers YouTube page or Instagram. I can't remember which one it was on. Maybe both. Who knows? But he did talk about Tortorella, and there is a mutual respect there because John sees that he's a developing player with a big body with a great shot, and John likes his shot. So because he likes that shot and he sees that nobody else on the team may be able to score like that in the future, he's going to give him a lot more benefit of the doubt than he would other players. So, Tyson's going to be there. He's going to be there in preseason. He's going to play all the preseason games. And then I think they'll start to decide where his game is at and maybe even give him a few more at the beginning of the year. The one thing that Tyson said to me that was really smart was that he talked about the Phantoms run, and he did talk about how that really helped him. And that, I think, is bigger than the 8 games he played in the NHL last year, because he got to play in the playoffs, got to feel like a winner. And let's face it, there's a lot of Flyers that don't know that feeling right now. And so that's a big thing for him to kind of carry up with him.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, it's kind of an interesting situation with these two teams right now, because we've got a former Ranger coach coaching the Flyers and a former Flyer coach now coaching the Rangers. And it's funny, I don't know if you guys remember the Road to the Winter Classic show. I don't even know if they still do that. But yeah, great show. Behind the scenes stuff is awesome. But that was the case at the time. Tortorella was coaching the Rangers and Laviolette was coaching the Flyers. I figure I got a couple questions about, Laviolette obviously going into this season. But should we let everybody know about today's sponsor?
We've got more Flyers Rangers talk coming up next. But first, we are going to talk to you about FanDuel.
Football season is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, players, props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Take some time to visit FanDuel and include money lines, props, etc. around your team.
All right. So, yeah, Peter Laviolette, what can you tell us about him? Obviously, a little bit of an up and down tenure with the Philadelphia Flyers. Goes to the Stanley Cup final the first year there as a 7 seed. And, was in the playoffs the next couple of years after that. And then it kind of fell apart the last couple of years. But, what do you remember, first of all, from Peter Laviolette taking that team to the finals? And what do you think his strengths are as a head coach?
I think he's fiery is a word I would use to describe him. He's very intense as well. And I think you saw that in his time with the Capitals, that he's just kind of a guy that has such tunnel vision as to what he wants to accomplish. And I also think that he's really good at using the right players at the right time. I feel like he really knows how to get the right matchups. And make sure that the team is in the best position to succeed. But, I think, as is the case with many coaches, there's just a burnout point that you have with every team that you coach there where you just can't do anymore. And he had reached that time in Washington. But I feel like he's coming into New York at a similar kind of juncture as he did when he got to Washington. I think less so than with the Flyers, who were in a much more of a tumult situation when he took over, than, just coming into Washington as a team on the rise with a superstar.
Yeah, what I could say is, and I'll give a quick cheap plug. People could buy my Winter Classic book at Amazon.com, but I've covered both those coaches a lot because I covered all the Winter Classics and also in season. And what Laviolette will do for the Rangers is he'll unlock Panarin. He'll let Panarin basically do whatever he wants so he can get him back on track. And he'll try and push those rookies with open ice play and see what he can get out of them offensive wise. Now, maybe not Kakko because he's really good defensively. So I don't know if there's as much offense to open up there because he's so good defensively. And so he may get a little less offensive chance than someone like Lafreniere, but he's fiery. Everybody remembers him throwing the jelly jar against the wall with the Flyers. So he's going to have these moments. He's unafraid. Like, I remember him telling Ilya Brizgalov that he wasn't going to be the Winter Classic starter, and Brizgalov stormed out of the area that we didn't get to see how they were talking, but we got to see Brizgalov right after, and he wouldn't speak to the media. He was really ticked off, and that probably started a chasm with Brizgalov and his Flyers career, but Laviolette didn't care. Bob was his guy and that was his guy. So he's that way. And I think in a way that's good for New York because the area is not going to be too big for him.
That makes sense. And, something that you both kind of touched on this a little bit, but Laviolette and his track record with young players. There's kind of been some mixed reviews of that, and I've done a couple of crossovers with. We talked to Locked On Predators and we talked to Locked On Caps about his tenures with those teams. But obviously he's been to the finals 3 different times with 3 different teams, and a lot of those rosters, you go back and look at it. There's some young players in those rosters, guys that in many cases went on to have great careers, and in some cases are still having great careers. So. And you mentioned, Lafreniere and Kakko, but is this a good coach for, a Ranger team that still has a lot of young players and a lot of guys that are still trying to find their way in the NHL a little bit?
And we're going to find out. That's a great question. We don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Don't really know.
Yeah, I think also he's a lot different now than he was back then. And so maybe then he would have been more balanced with the vets versus the young players. He's a little bit more set in his ways right now. And so that dynamic could be a lot different now than when it was when he took over the Flyers. I think the same can be said for John Tortorella. I think he's just, there's the same fieriness, but a kind of different method to the madness.
Yeah, well, with Torts, and you guys are well aware of this. You watch hockey and you just went through year 1 of John Tortorella with the Flyers, but he's not somebody that's very subtle, or you're going to wonder what he's thinking or, what the deal is. Obviously, he's going to always speak his mind out there, and for better or worse, he's always going to be himself, and he's going to do things his way. Now that you mentioned Torts, there was something I had to ask you guys about, because obviously used to coach the Rangers, Kevin Hayes, former player on the New York Rangers, and the two of them seemed to butt heads this past season, and there was times where Hayes was benched. He was a healthy scratch, I think at least once or twice. And then this offseason, they sent him to St. Louis for just a 6th-round pick. And I believe they retained half his salary, if I'm not mistaken. So just your take on that entire situation, because the whole thing just seems strange to me. I know Hayes maybe was a bit of a defensive liability, but what led to all that, and was it warranted? Tortorella sitting Hayes down for a little while there. Yeah,
I think there's 2 sides to this, because I think that Hayes definitely was struggling. He had been putting some points on the board, but then, struggled for a little while. But then I think that Tortorella didn't put Kevin Hayes in the best position to succeed, that he forced him into the wing position, which isn't what Kevin Hayes likes to do. And so he wasn't succeeding as much. And he likes to play center. He calls himself a center. And so when you take him out of where he's most comfortable, that's not going to bode well for the player overall. And then there was the conflict around that.
Yeah, honestly, I think the coach was right in this instance for the most part, because there were times when Kevin Hayes was coasting. Even though he was getting points, he was coasting at certain parts of the game, coasting defensively, maybe not being serious enough with the puck, which is like a Laviolette term, but, that's something that he used to talk about. And so I feel like when he started to do that, that's what really rubbed Tortorella the wrong way. Then all the position change stuff started to happen, and I think that's when it got bad. I really can't blame this one on Torts.
Fair enough. And, just in general, obviously, again, year 2 of the John Tortorella tenure there, and obviously takes over a team that's got a lot of work to do and kind of rebuilding from the ground up, so to speak. But, heading into year 2, how do you guys feel overall about Tortorella? Like, is he the guy for the job, to eventually turn things around there in Philly and get this team, back and to being a playoff team and a serious contender eventually?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, because he, as you know, is probably not the best coach suited for a rebuild in the grand scheme of things. But here he is, and here we are. And, all indications based on what's being said is that he knows what he's getting into this season, and it's going to be a real interesting course over this year. And I think that at the end of this season, we're going to know whether or not he's in it for the long haul, and he thinks he can do this. And if not, or he's willing to do this, and if not, I think he'll walk away amicably, and they'll have him retire or something like that. But if things go well and things progress, he could be in it for a while and be successful.
Yeah, I think this is a big year for him. We're going to see how Danny Briere now that he's firmly in charge, will react to him when things happen, whether it's not playing a young guy, whether it's benching somebody, whether we're going to see how all that plays out now, because now it's going to affect the future, where with Chuck Fletcher, everything was sort of like short term. Everybody had short term feelings about it. And honestly, John Tortorella was, even though he got the money for a longer term coach, he was more of a short term fix when they hired him, not a rebuilding guy. So the rebuilding part we're going to see, he may not enjoy it. Like, we don't know.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big part of it. So looking at the Rangers side of things, like, what are the expectations for Laviolette and for this team this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the expectations haven't really changed. The fact that they made it to the Eastern Conference Final 2 years ago when everybody thought they were still kind of rebuilding, that really elevated the bar and really raised the expectations, I think, from the players and, the front office and the fans alike. And I don't think it's going to be any different this year. I think, people really expect the Rangers to be a team that's going to be one of the last couple of team standings and make a serious run at this thing. We will see. Obviously, they couldn't afford to bring back Tarasenko and Kane. I mean, I guess you never know with Kane. He's still out there, and that's going to be an ongoing storyline to track, even after the season starts here. But they don't really have any salary cap space, so it's hard to see that happening. But, with the little amount of cap space that they had this offseason, I thought they did a pretty nice job pulling in Blake Wheeler. I mean, yes, he's older now and not the player that he once was, but when you get Blake Wheeler, who just had 55 points for a so-so Jets team, when you get him for just $25K over the minimum, I think you got to do it, especially, again, it goes back to what I talked about earlier, Rangers being thin at right wing. So I thought that was a nice pickup. Jonathan Quick, I mean, obviously he's on the back nine here, to put it mildly, but I'm hoping that, being in a backup role, less wear and tear, less, expectations from him. I think he can do a decent job as the backup goalie. And just to name one more real quick, bring in Nick Bonino, 2-time Stanley Cup champion, and just kind of a hard-nosed, grinded-out kind of player. I think the Rangers could use a few more players like that, can kill some penalties, center the fourth line. So overall, I think they did a pretty nice job. And in addition to everything that I just said, the main core is back. A couple of guys left in free agency. Would have been nice to have Tyler Mott back. He goes to Tampa. But overall, the main players are still there. So you've got that going for you. And then you also hope, you keep your fingers crossed, that this is the year that Lafreniere and Kakko, specifically, a couple other young guys as well, take that next step forward and really become the players that people are hoping and expecting that they'll be. So expectations definitely still very high for this team.
Yeah, I mean, I just interviewed Will Cuylle at the rookie showcase, and even though he may not be playing in this game, he said the expectations are still the Stanley Cup. Like, he flat out said it, and he knows it, and his spot's in jeopardy, and I think it's in jeopardy because of Bonino, and I don't know if Bonino has it anymore. You could have, if it were me, and again, I'm the best coach in the league because I do it from here, you could have put Gaudreau at center, and you could have put Cuylle in there, and then you could have probably kept Tyler Mott as well. I think Ranger fans still would have been happy with that. Now I think Cuylle almost has to start the year in Hartford, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but I think he's really close to actually helping the team, and so that's the thing that kind of makes it hard for them. But yeah, Cuyle's a guy to watch. I think he made a big step over this last year.
Yeah, I like him as well. Physical player and has some offensive skill to go along with it. And got a little cup of coffee with the Rangers this past season. Ended up playing in 4 games with them. Got into a couple of fights. Showed that he's going to be a physical player. And we'll see. Obviously the fourth line right now, I would think Gaudreau is probably going to start on the third line. And the fourth line, you're looking at VZ, Bonino, and Pitlick. Maybe at some point, he squeezes somebody like Pitlick out of the lineup. Former Flyer there, former everything is Tyler Pitlick.
Yeah.
But, he's played for just about everything.
He's a great guy to know about for Puck Doku.
Yeah, you know what? While we're yes, he is. He definitely is. But while we're talking, I might as well ask you guys about Tyler Pitlick. I know he wasn't there for all that long, but just your impressions of him. He seems to get pretty good marks wherever he's been. Good locker room guy and just kind of a pest out there. So just any scouting report on Tyler Pitlick that you can give us.
Yeah, he's a great depth forward to have, and you can just slot him pretty much anywhere. You can move him up in the lineup if you have to, in the case of an emergency, I would say. But he's definitely, obviously, a bottom sixer. But I think that he's got that tenacity and real strong on the forecheck, and I think that he just makes any line he's on better. Yeah,
my issue with Pitlick, and he was terrific as a Flyer, and they probably should never have gotten rid of him, but that's a couple of years ago. Really good defensively, really good PK, would get occasional points, but I don't know where he is right this moment. So you're right. Maybe that's the part that, but he and Cuylle play different positions, even though Pitlick can play really either side. So that'll be interesting to see where that plays out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to it. And, it goes back to something we talked about earlier in the episode where, whether you're talking about Cuylle or whether you're talking about Othmann, probably makes sense for them to start the season in the AHL. I know Ranger fans are excited and they want to see these guys, but probably better to promote them to the NHL a little bit too late rather than too early. And, I think that definitely applies to both of these guys. Flyers made a couple of moves this offseason as well. There was somebody that, I was looking at free agents to be and guys that maybe the Rangers would be interested in. One of them was Garnet Hathaway. He ends up going to Philly instead. 2 years at $2.375 million a season. So, solid two-way forward overall. I mean, not a superstar, but just a hardworking, gritty player. Any thoughts on the Hathaway pickup there?
Yeah, honestly, I think it was pretty solid. I was surprised that he signed with the Flyers, to be honest. I thought he would want to go to more of a contender, but maybe the opportunity to get as much ice time wasn't out there for him in some other cases. And, to be a real mentor and to be part of the rebuild from the ground up could also be a really good opportunity for him as well.
Yeah, I would say Torts will like him and really potentially overuse him, and then he could be a good chip at the trade deadline.
Yeah, I think for sure. The goalie situation in Philly also really intrigues me because I don't know like who it's going to be. It's kind of hard. You guys probably have a better feel for it than I do, but you got Carter Hart coming back. Cal Peterson's there now too. Felix Sandstrom, a third-round pick from 2015. Is there anybody that has the leg up here or anybody that you'd like to see take over? I saw there was a controversy because Hart removed any mentions of the Flyers from his Instagram page or something like that. But yeah, just any thoughts on these guys and who you think will win the job, and if either you have a personal preference of who should be the guy.
Yeah, we did a couple shows about this at various points in the discussions and the churn, but I think that it's unclear what that social media thing was at this point. We don't have any information from Hockey Canada or the NHL as of yet. So we just have to go into things assuming that Carter Hart is your number one goaltender for the Flyers for this upcoming season until we hear otherwise. And beyond that, there's three other guys competing for that second spot in Cal Peterson and Sam Urson, who John Tortorella really likes. And then you also have Felix Sandstrom, who's kind of been there waiting in the wings for the last couple of years as well, and has gotten some NHL time over the last couple of seasons, and has one more year left on his contract. So it's a little bit of a murky situation, but for now, that's what we're going with.
Yeah, Hart's the number one until something else happens. But do I think there's a chance that he gets dealt during camp? Yeah, I think there's a chance, especially if a goalie goes down to a Stanley Cup contender. And so I can't tell you he's going to start the season with the team. I'm unsure.
Yeah, definitely an interesting situation to track. You sometimes see a team go into camp with okay, it might be this guy, it might be that guy, maybe there's a timeshare, but to have 3 or 4 different goalies who could conceivably, end up getting the bulk of the starts for your team, that's a very unique situation. I don't know if it's necessarily a good situation, but competition does make everybody better.
It complicates it. It does.
Yeah, I agree. So I did notice Rangers and Flyers, their first matchup is actually the day after Thanksgiving. So I don't know how you guys are going to be feeling that day or how I'm going to be feeling, but I mean, if you guys are up for another crossover, I'm probably game if you guys are.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I love the tradition of the Flyers Rangers post Thanksgiving afternoon game.
All right, so a big thanks, as always, to both Rachel and Russ of Locked On Philadelphia Flyers for teaming up for this special Metro Division crossover edition here. Huge thanks to you guys, as always, for checking out the Locked On New York Ranger podcast, your team every day. If you would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, this @LO_NY _Rangers, and definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.